and I are having like a New Zealand. Welcome to Media Path. I am Louise Palenker.
And I'm Fritz Coleman.
Fritz and I are sort of the analog version of customers who enjoyed this may also enjoy that. And we only tell you about the stuff we like. For example, a book called My Dad's Funnier Than Your Dad by our upcoming guest, Kelly Conway. She wrote about her life and her relationship with her father, Tim Conway. It's a sensational book. Kelly is coming right up. But first, Fritz, how are you feeling? Fritz has COVID, which is why he is safely sealed in his own environment this week. Fritz, how are you?
I feel good today. I had I'm going to get into a diagnosis here that maybe you didn't ask for, but I've had 2 nights of good sleep. It was really just a hideous sore throat and a cough, but as quickly as it came, it went away. So today I'm feeling much better. I'm still going to quarantine till Friday, but I'm feeling much better. Thanks for asking. It ain't no joke. I'm so thankful I've been vaccinated. So.
Right. I'm glad you're feeling better. So what sort of programming has been keeping you company?
All right. Well, I first would like to offer The Informant, Fear and Faith in the Heartland. This is another documentary on Hulu from George Stephanopoulos. He has his own production company now, and they do documentaries on Hulu, and he does a great job. We now know that domestic terrorism is the biggest threat to national security, and this film goes right to the heart of it. It's the story of a very ordinary blue-collar, God-fearing guy in a middle American town called Garden City, Kansas, who becomes this reluctant hero. Now, Garden City happens to have a sizable population of Somali immigrants who moved to Kansas to escape the terror in their own home country. Most of them are employed at the big local meat packing plant in Garden City. The Somalis happily do these awful, grisly jobs at the meat packing plant that most Americans don't want because it was steady, good paying work in a peaceful country. And there's a tight-knit Somali community in Garden City with their own complex of apartment buildings, including a mosque. Now, on the other side of town lives an ordinary Joe named Dan Day. Dan gets invited to a barbecue, which, unbeknownst to him ahead of time, is a recruitment gathering for a local militia, the Garden City chapter of the Three Percenters. Now, the Three Percenters participated in the January 6th insurrection and were responsible for the plot to kidnap and kill the governor of Michigan, you remember. Dan didn't want anything to do with the militia. And somehow, the FBI got word of Dan's attendance at this barbecue, and they reached out to him secretly to ask him some questions. After the FBI discovered that Dan wasn't a believer, they recruited him to be an informant. In other words, keep attending those meetings, wear a wire. If there's ever any discussion about doing violence to the Somali community, please let the FBI know. Well, Dan embedded for 1.5 years with this group, and lo and behold, he uncovered a plot that involved the Three Percenters building a fertilizer bomb large enough to completely destroy the entire Somali apartment complex and kill many, many people. Thanks to Dan's informing, the FBI was able to bust the group a couple of days before they were going to actually pull off their plot. It's an incredible story of an ordinary guy becoming a reluctant and an unlikely hero. We see him interacting in his own shy way with a grateful Somali community, and you end up hoping that there are many patriotic Americans who would step up and do the same thing, even though he put his family in grave danger. Really interesting documentary.
Yeah, I'm going to be careful with my barbecue invitations.
Please do.
I think that's a cautionary tale. Wow, what a hero. That's extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I have been watching a series on Hulu called Love, Victor. Love, Victor is set in the world of the groundbreaking movie Love, Simon, which was inspired by Becky Albertalli's acclaimed young adult novel Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda. The book and the film. That's a great title, right?
Yep.
The book and the film tell the story of high school student Simon and reveal just how agonizing it is, even in an open-minded family, for a gay kid to come out. Straight is still the assumed default, and rather than raising kids in a world where they are told, hey, you may be attracted to girls or guys or both, you may feel mostly male, mostly female, or both or neither, gay and gender fluid or trans kids hear all kinds of homophobic language in peer groups, in the locker room, and sometimes even in jokey ways in their own households, further compounding the courage required to finally come out. The Hulu series Love, Victor takes place in the same high school where Simon recently graduated, Michael Cimino plays Victor, who faces his own painful journey towards revealing his personal truth. Along his path, Victor reaches out to Simon. Their texting communication nicely narrates the piece. Complicating his journey towards coming out, Victor, the family peacemaker, grapples with a surly sister and his parents feuding and infidelity. The writing is sharp and funny, and it is a great look at modern teenage life. Love, Victor is on Hulu.
It sounds really contemporary. You and I had a long discussion about what pronouns to use on people who choose to have other pronouns
Right.
yesterday, and this is very current. And I called my daughter and asked her about the whole pronoun thing. I said, do any of your friends insist on new pronouns? And she said no, but she said all the professors in her classes at college ask the students how they would like to be recognized as to their pronouns. So it's in the culture now. So it sounds to me like this is one of those things that sort of expands that topic. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, my next to offer is Carole King and James Taylor's concert on CNN called Just Call Out My Name. This 2-hour concert is a baby boomer fever dream. It's the culmination of a lifelong friendship and professional collaboration. Back in the 1970s, James asked Carole to join his band when he was playing at the Troubadour, and the rest is history. It contains excerpts from their 2010 Troubadour reunion tour. There was 3 continents, 50 performances, and it all started at the Troubadour right here in Los Angeles. The two trade hits back and forth on stage, and when one is singing their hit, the other accompanies on a piano and a guitar. Carole does all the great hits from her Tapestry album, which broke a record for being at the top of the Billboard album charts for like a decade. She sings It's Too Late, So Far Away, Smackwater Jack. She also does the iconic hit she wrote for the Drifters, Up on the Roof, that gets a great response. James, and I have to say, who is in pristine voice, does Sweet Baby James, Caroline on My Mind, Fire and Rain. The peak emotional moment of the show is their duet on You've Got a Friend. That includes a little anecdote that James tells. When Carole played the song for him in the 70s during a sound check at the Troubadour, he recognized that this was going to be one of the greatest songs ever written. And he asked her humbly if he could record it. She said yes, even though she intended to include it in her own first album. It was a sign of their great love and friendship, which permeates the 2 hours. It was on CNN Sunday night. It just made me smile, and you'll be able to see it streamed soon on HBO Max.
And we see our friend Lee Sklar in there. And
Oh, God, he was so good. And you get to see his beard evolve. It started as a brown beard at the beginning of the Carole and James tours, and then ended up as, Santa Plus.
and a plus.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've been to see them together, and I remember walking out and walking past their bus and just wanting to climb up onto the bus so that I could hang out with them for the next couple of hours.
Yeah. It was a great memories. I think you'll enjoy it.
Well, we're going to introduce our guest, Kelly Conway, because she's awesome. So Kelly Conway is a highly acclaimed Hollywood costume designer and wardrobe stylist, and the author of her first book, My Dad's Funnier Than Your Dad, growing up with Tim Conway in the funniest house in America. I'm not going to contest that. Okay, you guys. Welcome, Kelly. As you write in your book, you did have a wonderful childhood.
I had the best childhood, and I know that's not true for necessarily everyone. I have 5 younger brothers, and we had a blast growing up because my mom and dad are fun and funny, and they raised us like we were in Michigan or Ohio. So we were pretty grounded. Until now.
Until now.
No, I'm kidding.
We can help with that.
I have 3 children, and if just one of them is as devoted to me when I get really old as you are to your father, I will have considered my parenting a success. This is a really about a beautiful, almost mystical relationship between a daughter and her father. And the rest of the 3-dimensional quality of Kelly is that she was the oldest child of 6 kids in the family, or it was 6 kids, and you were the oldest, and you were the only daughter, and you had to wrangle all those brothers. But it's really very, very touching. I enjoyed it so much.
Thank you. I hope your kids do that too. If they don't, I still got some left in me.
I
So
think the horse has left the barn. I don't think that's going to happen.
Where do we list? Where do we enroll? Is it as hard to get as COVID tests? Because
yeah.
now talk about your dad's personality, because in reading any kind of book about people that we feel we grew up with, we want them to be exactly who we need them to be, and they aren't always. But in the case of your dad, he is that guy that everybody in America was in love with, right?
He is. And that's, I think, why he lasted so long. And he has so many friends that, I've never heard a bad word said about my dad. And I don't know, I think eventually it would come back to me if he were a jerk, or if he, were different at work than he was at home. So I just think that he was just genuine, and that's exactly how he was at work and at home and at the grocery store and at the hardware store and wherever we were. He just
that really shows up in your examples of him encountering fans. And sometimes fans are so excited to meet a star that they're not thinking about the scene that they're in, like a person having a meal at an expensive restaurant. But your dad was very patient with fans and appreciated their attention and made them feel comfortable, which I have a lot of respect for. Not everybody.
He did. And it never, it never bothered us, because I think we knew my dad had a good job in high school and junior high and high school, but I don't think we ever really put together how many people he reached. So like I said, my parents thought we were in Ohio or Michigan, and they just kind of kept us all at a level that was acceptable. So, and when people did come up to him, they were always so nice. And, we'd sometimes say, hey, Dad, why, you're eating dinner. Why do you have to do that? And he goes, it's when they stop asking that I'm going to start worrying. So sit down and shut up.
Exactly.
I had one experience with your dad where I'm at some event. I've got my recording device slung over my shoulder, and I walk up to him, and I was trying last night to think of the word that best describes the encounter. And I came up with gracious. He's just I wanted to say, sweet, kind, unassuming, all these other things, but he was just a gracious person, and always made you feel like it's okay. I'm happy to talk to you, and you're not interrupting, anything. This encounter is fine with me. Just lovely. A really
always
lovely spirit. Yeah.
Always. And he was like that with us, with friends or teachers or whatever. And because he didn't ever think that he was any better or different or I mean, he always said if it hadn't worked out in LA or in Hollywood, that he would have been happy going back to Chagrin Falls and work at the hardware store. He might have been managing by the time he got into his 40s, but he would have been just as happy anywhere else. And he's lucky that he had the run that he did.
And there's a lot right now with Betty White. There's a lot of videos going around, and then your dad always gets scooped up in all of this energy, from this generation. And then you get to rewatch him crack everybody up. And I was watching, we don't often laugh that hard as when we're watching him. We can go years without laughing that hard where you can't catch your breath. But you're watching Carole and Vicky, and I don't know if it was Dick Van Dyke or whoever. I couldn't tell who it was because they were just bent over. Your dad's going into something that he hadn't done in dress rehearsal. And part of what was so excruciating was they knew there was more coming. He wasn't done. And how were they going to ever survive? And so I
think that's part of it, is the anticipation of, they knew he had more always. But yeah, I just saw a clip recently with Betty White, actually yesterday, that somebody on a red carpet, or somebody's in a line, and says, "Who makes you laugh?" And she said Tim Conway, and that I melted when I saw that, because she is the female version as far as being gracious and kind and generous and loving. Like, they're just two different, next level.
She was supposed to be your stepmom.
Oh, okay, I'll take it.
You mentioned this before, but I'm going to drill down on it a little bit. Your dad's connection with audiences was not only his humor, But as you said, his middle American attitude and his values were never lost, even when he moved to California. Rather than hobnobbing with snooty upper crust show business types, he'd rather be in his workshop building a birdhouse. He never lost his middle American roots. And I think people connected with that, even in an unspoken way.
I think so too. And like I said, that's how he treated all of us and our friends and his friends. And it was nothing ever fancy or crazy. It was just, we always used to say, how come the National Enquirer doesn't write about you? We wish they would, so something would happen. We could have something to look at. And he'd say, because I don't cause any attention to do anything like that. I don't go to parties. I watch movies with you guys. I don't go to the Playboy Mansion. I'm having a swim meet in the backyard with you all. So he never did anything to make, and that's one of the things that he drilled into us our whole lives. Never cause any unwanted or unnecessary attention to yourselves, whether it's in your car or at school or at work or whatever you're doing. If you're walking, don't walk weird. Just be a normal person and don't cause, there's enough attention on people and things. So just don't cause any, with your clothes or whatever you're doing, don't ever cause any extra unwanted attention. Neither did he.
Yeah. That's very interesting. And that's why when things started to go south with, in his 80s, it wasn't anything that he had summoned or manifested. It just kind of happened, and you guys had to weather it together, but you had each other.
Yeah. When I had to seek legal action to get visitation, with him I put it off for a long time because it was building before I did it. And I put it off for a long time because I didn't want that attention onto my dad or to myself or my brothers or anybody, because I knew it was going to be negative and it was going to get blown out of proportion. And in actuality, I just wanted to visit my dad. And we even, I'm talking about the last year or so when I wasn't allowed to see him. We filed the papers downtown LA under my dad's real name, which is Thomas Conway. But when he was wanting to get in the Screen Actors Guild, there was another Thomas Conway. And so he had to change it to Tim. So we filed papers under Thomas. We did everything we could to not let it go public. And then literally 10 minutes after they filed the papers, it was crazy. It was all over the place. I didn't want that, but
I think you have a lot to teach everybody about that experience, and I want to get into that. That's the third act of your dad's life. But before we got to that part, which pulled my heart out of my chest, what massaged my heart was your relationship with your father when you were a young girl. And you were the only daughter, and there's a very special relationship between fathers and daughters, but he seemed to be very aware of your feelings at all times and was really cognizant of them. And I think one of the most touching stories in your book was when you were going on your first day to that Catholic elementary school in Encino, and it wasn't working out well. If you don't mind, share that with our listeners, because it was heartbreaking and beautiful.
Well, he didn't trust anyone for some reason. Well, not for some reason, because he was in a big city, rather than a small town in Ohio. It was always a big city to him. In fact, when I was really little, when he went out of town, he wouldn't have my mom and I stay at the Sportsman's Lodge because he thought someone was going to kidnap me or my mom or both of us at the same time. So he was really, really protective, and he's an only child. So I think that came from just not, worrying about all the kids all of a sudden, where they are and who they're friends with and where they're riding their bikes. So I went to school. It was Our Lady of Grace on Ventura Boulevard. And he dropped me off, and he was circling the block a few times, up White Oak, down Rancho, down Ruby, or whatever the streets were. And at one point he saw me crying on the playground, and I tell it as, I think I wasn't paying attention, and kids went into their classrooms, and I was busy playing in the mud or rocks or something, and I didn't see them go in. So I started crying because I didn't know where anyone he was. And my dad got out of his car and literally reached his hand over the fence and pulled me up by my hoodie or uniform and said, "That's it. You're not going back. Say goodbye." And I went in, he put me in another school where he knew I was taken care of, or not. I mean, it wasn't that I wasn't being taken care of. I lost track of who they were. So anyway, he's very protective, and he just saw me crying. And I don't know if he expected to, because he did keep circling around the block, he
But
said.
I thought that was, he dropped you off, and most dads would say, okay, she's gone. Let's go to Starbucks and get a thing.
Yeah.
He dropped you off, and he circled the building just to make sure you were okay. And you didn't know he was there. And had he not done that, he wouldn't have seen you in distress as the rest of the elementary school went back indoors and you're left alone crying on the field.
He may still be there. But you know what? He knew when to protect you, and he knew when to encourage you to figure something out.
Yeah, exactly. And he did that with all of us. Like if I went on a sleepover, he knew that I wasn't going to last past 10 p.m. So he would circle the block of whatever house I was in with a bunch of other girls on a Friday night. He knew that he would get the phone call. So he stayed close all the time. And that's what I miss most, is he always knew where I was, what I was doing. Call when I get to Mammoth, even if it was at midnight. But if he did think I was going to Mammoth at midnight, I'd go say bye to him as I was leaving the valley. And he'd go, "It's 6:00. It's dark out. You're sleeping over and you'll leave at 5 a.m. I go, "Okay." So he would have, and that was recently, and I'm old, so that was recent.
But in the birth order situation, it is kind of an unusual arrangement of kids, because usually when there's one of the opposite sex, it's because they had a whole bunch of boys and they really want a girl, and then they get one. And so it's interesting. It seems like you and Tim, your brother, and Sean, the youngest, are the most connected, and these four boys in the middle maybe felt like a herd, and you guys felt like more of individuals. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I think I'm being a girl and being the eldest that was a separate thing. And then, Tim, my brother Tim, is the first boy and Sean's the baby. So I think they were like, the bookends, and Patrick, Jamie, and Corey were in the middle, and they got as much in trouble and as much attention and as much as anybody else did. But I considered Sean, my youngest brother, my child. So he got a lot of my attention. And if you read it, I didn't want him at first because I wanted a sister so badly that, once I connected with Sean, I never let him out of my sight. If I couldn't find him in a room or in a house, I would go crazy and call the police.
Oh, you're such a nurturer.
So in your dad's small circle of close friends, but good friends, some were his professional associates, like Harvey Korman and his family, and they would come over to swim all the time at your house, and they were very close. I can't imagine just being there and watching those two interact, even in a non-official way. Were they just funny all the time?
All the time. They were funny all the time. If they're walking down a street in New York, or on a plane, or, my dad was constantly trying to make Harvey panic about something. I mean, Harvey thought Osama bin Laden was after him.
I know, I love
that
story.
And he really did. And my dad would go to great lengths to scare the crap out of him. Like one time he sent, the guys that paint the curbsides in LA in the Valley, and they put your address up and they paint it and you give them $50 or whatever it is. Yeah. There was someone doing that at my dad's house, and my dad went outside and gave him $50 and then gave him another $100 and sent him up to Harvey's house. And Harvey wasn't expecting him, and he called the police and thought that there was a terrorist after him. And my dad told the kid to say something, I don't know, to scare him, but he was constantly trying to bother him.
Person. Yeah.
Very, very, him. And Ernie Anderson. Did you know Ernie Anderson,
I
Fritz?
want to talk all about Ernie Anderson. I think there's a great 2 degrees of separation between your family and the Anderson family, especially with the famous
Yeah.
Paul Thomas Anderson. So
Yes.
I'll set it up and you talk about it.
Okay.
So your dad came out to LA from Cleveland with Ernie Anderson, with whom he had done a TV show back in Cleveland that was successful, and they came out here to be stars. Your dad became a big star, and Ernie became probably the preeminent voice of God guy on the whole planet. And the history goes on. Paul Thomas Anderson, the famous director, and his most recent movie, Licorice Pizza, has a great acting job from your brother Tim in there. And when I saw that, I just burst out laughing, thinking both those guys in heaven right now are probably smiling, watching this confluence of the two families later on.
I agree. You guys both, did you see it?
Yes, I did. Your brother's a good actor. I was
Isn't he
very
good?
impressed. Yeah.
I was surprised, and I want to see it again. I think I have the DVD now. But I want to see it again because I was so nervous. And so we went to see Paul invited us to the premiere in Westwood. And my sister-in-law, Jen, and Sophia, my niece, were all in one row. And I was dying because I'm watching, those big theaters in Westwood. I'm watching all, like 1,000 people watch my brother. Like my brother with the sideburns. I was so nervous to see him that I thought he was so good.
He was very, I sent him a text and I said, can I please be your seat filler at the Oscars?
We love Paul too. Paul, we have never separated from our childhood games.
That's what I want you to talk about your relationship with the Anderson family and your dad being friends with him and all that stuff.
Well, they knew each other from Cleveland. My dad met him on a roadside. I think the story they tell is my dad's little MG midget car was overheating, or he couldn't get it in and out of first gear or something. And Ernie was literally in the car next to him in Cleveland and looked over and said something that I can't repeat in public, but he said something about his car. They pulled over and were friends ever since. That's how they met, in the street. Yeah. They ended up getting along great, and they had a radio show and then a TV wraparound show in Cleveland. And their radio show was so nobody listened to it, and they would make up guests to that my dad would come in and do a voice of somebody. And that's where the character Dirk Diggler from Boogie Nights that Paul wrote and directed, Dirk Diggler, the character, was a character my dad did in Cleveland. It wasn't the same guy. It wasn't a porn star, but it was the name that he took for that character. So my dad got a kick out of that, and they messed around in Cleveland. And Rosemarie, who's my godmother, came to or saw them. Someone told her about them, and she saw them and invited them out to LA to do Steve Allen's show, or to meet him, I guess. And then they both came out. I mean, my dad and mom drove out. My mom was pregnant with me. They drove out in a little Volkswagen from Cleveland, and Ernie and his wife Edwina did the same thing, and they all landed here. And
Ernie went on to do The Love Boat. He was he was the ABC network announcer with his, like, when you die, you want to hear his voice making the announcement in heaven.
Right. I'm hoping for that.
Great family connection.
The kids, they have 4 kids. We had 6. And so the 10 of us and the parents had a blast. We took vacations together. We were in Hawaii a lot. We were in Lake Arrowhead. We were either at their house in Studio City or our house in Encino every weekend. Disneyland trips, everything. We did everything with them. In fact, Paul Thomas is named after my dad, because my dad's name is Thomas.
Oh,
yeah.
Do you think because he wrote that interesting movie that I didn't understand, but it was beautiful, Magnolia, he named it after the street you lived on in Encino?
Well, we did grow up on Magnolia, and I've never asked him that. I kind of assumed that was that was kind of it. Or, I mean, Magnolia, as you know, goes the length of the valley, almost to his house, almost to their place. They grew up in Studio City near Vineland, Colfax around there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so. I mean, I never want to put an idea in his brain, but I think he probably did.
Describe your mom's personality. You do a good job in the book of depicting her. She's a saucy lady. And what was the attraction? What worked? And then why did it ultimately stop working?
I think it worked. They met at Bowling Green State in Toledo. And I think they were friends for a while. And my mom was funny too. She was salty for sure, because we were 6 little idiots running around and bothering her every day. But she was the eldest of 7 kids, so she had to kind of wrangle them as well. So I don't know. I think my dad was probably attracted to the big fun family that she had. Her family, everyone in it is more fun than she is, and it was an odd combination, but they had a blast until they didn't. And I think mostly they just had different ways of bringing us up. My dad wasn't the reprimanding type dad. Like, I mean, he of course he would, if he would reprimand us if we were doing something different or something we shouldn't. But my mom had some volume on her for sure, and she got our attention quickly. And my dad would do it a little more subtly. Like, there's a story in the book where I came in to say goodbye to them for school, and I had something that, I probably had a bathing suit top on to go to school because it was hot, which is not appropriate, by the way. But, my mom would say, "Get that off, you tramp." And my dad would go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Can we not send her off in tears to school?" So, he'd come in my closet and go, "Here, how about something with sleeves on it?" And I go, "Okay, cool." And my dad would make everything better. They just had totally different ways of bringing us up.
Mm-hmm. And looking at the world.
And looking at the world. And they got along for a long time. And then, I don't know, people change, and nobody hated each other, and there wasn't, I think they drifted and decided that there wasn't any screaming or yelling with their fights. It just kind of stopped. And I say in the book too that I don't even remember when my dad moved out. I think they probably did it while we were at school, or I just blocked it out of my memory bank. I have a pretty good memory, but I don't remember any of that. And too, when I was writing this book all during COVID, we started writing in the end of February in 2020. So it was right at the beginning. It was a nice project to do, but there's so many things that I realized that I never really realized before in saying it out loud and writing, and with these memories, you kind of figure stuff out, and I did figure a lot out, all these things that my dad taught us without really teaching us,
So it's really therapeutic. I mean,
oh my gosh,
writing, it feels like it's going to be an incredibly difficult thing to do, but people who do write or people who journal, I think it's almost like our dreams. It's like we're processing while we're doing it.
I agree. I mean, I can barely write. I can barely read. So I had help. Carolyn St. Clair is a fabulous writer, and the stories that I can tell stories, and I can set it up and do the basic math, but I'm definitely not hooked on phonics. She's with the punctuation and the spelling and all that. She was amazing. And she's the one who tied it all together, to make sense. Mm-hmm. But it was a great process.
It is like, I stayed up very late when I was getting close to the end. I know what's going to happen, but I don't know how it happens. And so that's what you're reading for, because it's just I think I emailed you. It's just breaking my heart while I'm reading this. You just want to reach in and fix it. But it's one of those things that, as you experience, there's not a lot you can do. And I thought maybe we could talk a little bit, if you think it's time, Fritz, in the show, to talk a little bit about what children can do. Because oftentimes by the time your mother or your father is getting into their later years, and one of them has already gone and or they
Mhm.
married somebody else. So your parents don't die on the same day. So we're all kind of faced with they might be living with some other people when they get to this phase. And
Right.
what's my agency within that as their child? And it seems from your experience that you didn't have, there wasn't a ton.
Yeah, I
It's
think we
funny.
have to, I want to talk so much about it because I think Kelly has so much advice to offer people. I just want to set it up. Your mom, your biological mother, passed away from cancer. Your
Mhm.
father married Charlene, who later on, who happened to be a family friend, which further complicated your relationship with her because the great relationship you started to have with her didn't end up so great. She had a
Mhm.
daughter from her previous marriage, Jackie. So, what we're talking about, this darkness in your life happened after your father had married Charlene and had Jackie, and the family chemistry changed a little bit, and then your father got ill. So, that's what we're talking about.
But it's a wife of
Well,
30 years. That's something else
Yes,
for sure.
yeah,
yes.
yeah. And I loved her for 30 those, and I loved her before. She was so fun. And when you realize that your parents aren't just your parents, that they need a companion and they need other friends and they need to be grown-ups. They're not just these superheroes that take care of you. And honestly, it took me a while to understand that because they're just your dad. And why do you have to date anyone? And why do you have to, you know, go out, and why do you need someone to hang out with? Why can't you just hang out with mom or nobody? So I loved her because she was a family friend. I knew her before, and I thought that was a great situation to not have a total stranger come into our house, and because she was always around. So that part I loved, and I considered myself lucky to know her and tend to love her. And then we had a great thing for 30 years. There were a few bumps in there, which any family would have, but it wasn't anything serious. It was, like, why'd you leave the milk out? And, she's Italian, so she would get loud, and I'm not Italian. So I would cry for a day and thinking that she hated me because she yelled at me, but she forgot about it 2 minutes after she yelled at me and she was fine. So I had to get used to that, but I loved her. And then I don't know what happened. I can assume that when you lose a spouse, losing a dad is, even though we hate it and we don't want to ever see parents leave, it's a natural progression that happens. And, I have been dreading that day since I'm a little kid. And I talk about that in the book too. Like, I always kind of thought about it, what's going to happen when you're not here? And he's like, I'm 40. I'm not going anywhere. So,
Talk about your dad's diagnosis. It's important that people understand his slow decline and what caused it.
it's something called normal pressure hydrocephalus. Normal pressure hydrocephalus, and it's a fluid that your spinal fluid collects in your brain, and we all have this fluid running around, and we have a natural valve somewhere back here that drains it and pushes it through, and when that valve isn't working, it wreaks havoc on your everything. On that fluid has to move around and keep you healthy and good. So if that valve isn't working, it happens to premature babies and it happens to elderly, not many people in between. They put an artificial valve in to regulate the fluid. And if that doesn't work, then you're in trouble. And that's what happened. The valve didn't work. They put the wrong one in, and then they put a kid's one in, and then it was a mess. And the part with Charlene is that I know that a daughter's relationship is much different than a husband and wife. I understand that. And I think she thought I was overstepping boundaries, and it was a control thing. I understand her panic, and her best friend is leaving, is fading, and is my dad too. But it's different when it's a spouse. And she panicked, and it went from there, went downhill fast from there because all of a sudden, I couldn't bring him food if he was hungry. I couldn't bring him a blanket if he was cold. It started slowly, being isolated from him. And that was bad because I wasn't a, once a year Father's Day type daughter. It was I talked to him every day. And if it wasn't missing a day in there, my dad would call and go, I started calling hospitals and police stations. Where are you? And I'm like, I'm skiing. Sorry.
I
So,
must tell you, that was the big question I was left with. And I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear your take on it.
mm,
Do you believe that it's because of this magical, you had a very intimate, lovely, tight relationship with your father.
mhm.
And do you think her reaction was inappropriate jealousy at your bond with your father? Or do you think it had to do with, and maybe it had to do with both? Charlene also used drugs inappropriately, as did her daughter, and that sort of exacerbated whatever her
Yeah.
personality issues were. But it just seems to me like she was insanely jealous of your emotional connection to him. And although they were partners and friends, it will never be as close as the one Kelly had with Tim.
Yeah. And my relationship with my dad isn't going to be what they have. They know things about each other, and my dad and I know things that, like, it's just it's different planets. Um, I think drug use, we've all, I'm sure, known people who have been addicted to something or another and have gotten help. And whether they get help or not, it changes your personality, and it doesn't even change it from, I learned, you can read about it till the cows come home, but I learned right, up front, that if you take enough drugs, it changes your basic personality, and it makes you aggressive, and it makes you confrontational and paranoid. And it for some reason, I'm telling you, it felt like it changed. I mean, it did happen, throughout that year, but there was no coming back from it. The decisions, and that's when I figured out the decisions she was making for my dad were wrong, because her mind was compromised. And so she couldn't, make a decision to get him to an MRI on time. And that was Jackie's job, to be his driver. And then she was not of right mind either. So she's driving my dad to these appointments, and it just kind of things started falling through the cracks, like appointments and MRIs and places to be and things to do and changing bandages. And, after the surgery, I felt like if I wasn't there, then it would fall through the cracks, and it did. And
I think an addiction is it's your master. So you become selfish, and everything's in service to that. And you also
right.
become really moody, and you don't feel good when you're not medicated, and
Right.
And you're triggering her, because these are insecurities she's had all along that she was able to manage. I'm never going to share the bond that Kelly shares. Okay, fine. That's his child. Yet you're not supposed to. Love is abundant. It has all kinds of different representations in our lives.
Exactly.
It's a renewable resource. It's just that love makes more love. So, but something was being triggered, and she was serving that addiction. She wasn't serving your dad, and you recognized that.
Exactly.
Right.
And you were in such a bad place. You had every reason to react. I thought you were more patient than you needed to be. I was so frustrated for you.
Thank
But
you.
the point is, if you pushed it too far and pushed her in the wrong direction, she was going to make it impossible for you to see your dad, even to visit him anytime. So it was a really difficult position for you to be in.
It was. And I went through a lot of months, a year, to just say, okay, no problem. You don't want me to bring him lunch? No problem. Anything, because I felt like it was creeping up to that level of her not wanting me to see him anymore. So, when I would, and it wasn't anything malicious. I would go to Gelson's, and my dad's favorite meal in the world is a turkey sandwich with gravy over white bread and some potatoes. Like Thanksgiving, it's his favorite meal, and Gelson's has it every single day. So I would go get it, and it got to the point where she would, say, he's not eating that, he's eating what I made him, and throw it out. And I just wanted him to eat, and that was my goal. And I knew he liked it. And I didn't think it was anything crazy, but it got crazy. And it did take me a lot longer than it should have, because, like I said, I didn't want my dad's name or his illness to be that much in the public I waited a long time, and finally I just said, I can't handle it anymore, because not that I can't handle it, but he needs somebody to protect him and to advocate for him, because they weren't doing it. Their main goal was to see where they could be throughout that day and the level of pills they were taking. So that's when, when you're gambling or when you're drinking or whatever you're doing, that's the main part of your day. And it wasn't my dad. So
And
I just wanted him to, like I said, I didn't have a magical drug or cure or potion to help him. He was sick and I couldn't do anything about it. He had the best doctors he could in the world. And I wanted him to suffer less, because when you're that age, you suffer knowing that it could be around the corner, that you're not going to be here anymore. And you say bye to somebody at the hospital or at home, and that could be the last time you see him. So there's a lot of suffering even without the physical part, when it gets to that age.
I will recommend this book to people I don't even know in the grocery store, because I just think there's such a great lesson to be learned. We're in an age when we're talking a lot about elder care and the lack of legislation protecting people in assisted living and elder care facilities. And I think the way you conducted yourself and your dogged determination to stick up for your dad's welfare in light of a lot of pushback from a lot of people was so honorable and admirable that I think everybody could learn from it. And I'll tell you, one of the heartbreaking things, Weezy, was this guy was one of the most famous people in the world. And there were a couple of facilities he was in that you even talked about where they didn't do the laundry, they didn't clean up, there was trash everywhere. And I thought, what an undignified conclusion to the life of one of the most talented men in America. It was really very sad. And if it weren't for your advocacy, he might not have come out of that.
He was such a private person, and he was also so dressed every day. Like even on Christmas morning when, people are in pajamas and their hair is all over the place and they haven't brushed their teeth yet. My dad, Christmas morning, was in his great jeans, his Gucci loafers, a red Christmas sweater, and he was ready to go out. That's how he did his life every day. Yes. So for him to be not, compromised and not in the best shape, I knew that that's what was bothering him the most too, and not out of a vain way, but just let me go home. I just wanted him at home. I didn't, like I said, I didn't have a cure for him. I just wanted him to be at home where there were familiar things around him and people couldn't take pictures of him in the hallways. So it wasn't that much to ask for. I thought it was pretty simple, because there are a lot of good facilities near them. There are a lot of rotten, awful ones that you wouldn't take an animal to. So that rattled me the most. Was why couldn't he just be at home?
Now, what? Of course, absolutely. And what? Your stepmother is still with us?
As far as I know. I haven't heard from her. Okay, I'm assuming she's here. I don't know where they are. They still live together. Jackie never moved out, so that was an interesting dynamic there too. Yeah. She's 50, almost 50 years old, and just never moved out. So that was interesting.
Yeah, no, that whole thing is extremely codependent. And if you're not kind of falling into this codependency club, then we don't need your kind of positive, enlightened energy around here. But they must know about the book, and what do you feel, or what have you heard regarding that?
I'm assuming she does now, because all I know is that she reads People magazine every week, and there was something in People magazine about it. So I'm pretty sure they know. I don't know. I haven't heard anything. I thought I was going to hear something through an attorney, which I still might. I don't know. But, Tim, my brother, Fritz, Tim said, no, she's not going to do anything, because, she does that, then it'll cause more attention to them. So she may just sit back, and Tim's very neutral. My brother And I am too. I learned the lesson my dad taught us: don't draw any unnecessary attention to yourselves, and I didn't want to. And I want to stay neutral and everything, but I just couldn't. And Tim is still very like, keep it cool.
What about your other siblings other than Tim? Have they reacted to it? Have they been supportive?
The power went out here.
Oh, is that what happened?
I live in Malibu, and it's like Siberia sometimes.
Fritz had just asked you how your brothers had reacted to the book.
How the rest of your family reacted, if you're comfortable talking about that.
Yeah. I just sent my brothers copies of the book. I gave Tim one because he came to one of the signings we had the other day, and I just sent my other brothers the book. So we'll see. I hope they like it. I love them so much, and we had such a fun childhood, and we were all little at once, it seems. So because there's 6 of us in only 8 years, so we were all, we remember the same things. It's not like one was in college and one was in preschool. So I hope they like it. I think you honored your father so beautifully for the first 2/3, and the last 2/3 was very gutsy honesty on your part, telling the story. And truthfully, you had to interact with Charlene more than anybody else did. So that's your story. And I don't think there's an issue with that. It doesn't seem to me there. Yeah, I hope not. I think daughters, I'll speak of my family. The boys in my family, oh, Dad's okay, great. I'm glad he ate something last week. Okay, bye. And they're fine. Like, I gotta go.
That's so true.
But I think girls like kind of run into the fire. And because my dad and I were so close, I think it was just like, how can I help? And I want to help. And my dad would, I would never leave him in that that questionable state of couldn't even find him for 3 days at one point. So
Terrifying.
I hope they like it.
I think your brothers have probably told you over the years that they were grateful that they knew you were on the front line there.
They have, and I hope they still feel like that. And I will love them till forever. We had a blast, and they're such good boys, and they look like my dad, they sound like my dad. Right? I love them. We had a blast.
I think I talked to your brother about this on his radio show one time, and I'm fascinated by it because it was an issue in my family. I have 2 sons, and one of my sons dealt very well with having a dad that everybody interrupted at the grocery store and everybody recognized, not on the scale of Tim Conway, but just as a local person that people recognized. And whenever we would run into people in public, my attention was pulled away from my sons, by somebody who didn't care that I had 2 sons. They just wanted to get their autograph for their niece or something like that.
Right.
But it seemed to me that your father did you the great gift of allowing you, all of you kids, to blossom into your own human beings, to become special at what you were good at. You went to USC. It wasn't a fabulous experience for you. And so you developed your talent as a fashion person, and he supported you in finding out who you were on your own terms. And it had nothing to do with being Tim Conway's daughter. And he let Tim sort of develop his radio chops and supported him in that way. And I just respected that he was somebody who celebrated the individual that his children were.
He did. Thank you. And he did. You're right about that for sure. He always said it, people would ask him, do you want your kids to be in show business? He said, I'm not, if they want to, great. If not, then I'll support them in whatever they want to do. It's a hard business. It's a tough business. And I always say, you say, not on my dad's level, but I always say, my dad was no Kardashian, but people liked him. So it's your level and people, how much people love you in LA and wherever they can see you. It's, you were part of everybody's family growing up. You were in their homes and our whole family loves you. My brother, I met you once at Denny's.
Oh, were you there when he had his daughter? And I know Denny's is my favorite. I haven't been back there since the pandemic. I feel like I'm cheating on a wife or something. I haven't gone in there in so long.
You were with was it your son and your grandson maybe?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and Sophia was there, and Tim and I, and I was like, it was such an honor to meet you.
But anyway,
I feel like I know you.
Tim's kind of the same thing too. I mean, a person of notoriety locally, and he probably was very sensitive to how people react to him with Sophia around, and always concentrates on including her in the conversation. That's what I tried to do. One of my sons dealt well with it, and one did not. It was very interesting.
Well, one of the things that I noticed, and maybe you can speak to this, Kelly, as being that the child of somebody well known, was whenever Fritz was somewhere with his boys, and he would say, "These are my boys," people felt like they had the right to stare at them like they were in a zoo, the way you wouldn't stare at other children, and to examine them like they were looking for how he looked like Fritz, and they were looking for all these things, but they felt that they were completely entitled to examine these children. And one of his sons found that very uncomfortable. You could watch him shrink. Yes. And go ahead, Fritz.
No, you're exactly right. I'm agreeing with you.
But how did you handle that? Because I'm sure when Tim said, "This is my daughter, Kelly," people probably felt that, they could, kind of like squeeze you like a melon and see how you were doing.
True. One of my brothers, I think, Fritz maybe handled it like your other son. Like I don't think he took to it or maybe needed an extra bit of attention about it. So it's so funny because you raise kids, in the same room, the same bathroom, the same car, the same school, and people turn out differently. And it's just this chemistry of not necessarily what the parents did, but it's just, they're different people. And you think you
are so profoundly correct, because I, like your father, was an only child. And I have three children, and they are so diametrically different on every level. It's a flippin' miracle to me that they came from the same parents. It's so interesting.
And we literally grew up. We had several bathrooms in the home we grew up in, but we all ended up in one because we just liked being together better. But we were literally spitting on each other's heads, brushing our teeth in the same sink when there's two other bathrooms down the hall. So you raise these kids in this little pod, and then some want to work, some don't want to work. Some have a great, self-esteem, and maybe one or two don't. And in the 70s, you just kind of, I think my parents just, if one brother needed special attention, you're so. First of all, people didn't know what it was in the 70s. If someone needed special attention, just like, I don't know, give them an extra sandwich or a popsicle when they get home. So they did the best they could with what they had. And as every parent does. And the kids are just different, like it's just different. And then now we take care of, the boys that need a little extra attention. And so I even told my brother the other day, lives in Arizona. I said, whatever happens with all of this, I am going to help you guys do whatever it takes, because sometimes, you need a little help. So
right. We're all
I love that.
And let's close with the zipline story, because I think
it's the best.
Near death.
Somebody wasn't killed.
Well, near death. I mean, it was, they definitely knew us by name at the Encino emergency room. We'd walk in and they'd see this. They would see the station wagon and go, "I think it's Corey this time." Or is it Pat? No, Corey had stitches last week. So it was a lot of visits there. My dad built this zip line from our pool house to across the pool to a wall that kind of surrounded our yard. And he went to Builder's Emporium and got all the stuff for it, took us with him, and we're going, what is he making to kill us with, basically? And he set it up, and we each took turns. And the thing was he put it up on the roof, and then it kind of sloped down to the wall, and you're supposed to let go when you cross the pool. So I got first, swam in the pool, or dropped myself in the pool, Tim, and went in order. We always went in order of our ages. So, so my dad Sean was so little, the youngest one, he was so tiny that my dad had to pick him up and put him on the on the thing. And he said, Sean, okay, let go when you get across the pool. And he was barely talking. I think he was so little, and he just didn't. And he ended up slamming into the wall on the other end. And my mom saw it from up in her room and came screaming outside. Are you trying to kill my children? So luckily my dad he put a lounge chair mat in front of the wall just in case somebody forgot, because we weren't all scholars in school. I mean, we were funny, but that's another thing. My dad always said, I would get in trouble for not getting straight A's or getting a C, or God forbid I got a D in something because I was at cheerleading practice more than I was at school. That my mom would scream at us to, you got to get straight A's and you're better than that. And my kids are not going to get B's and C's. And my dad would come in and go, okay, whoa. Kelly, can you name the 7 dwarfs? I go, yeah, of course I can. And then he'd go, okay, so if you're at a racetrack, how do you bet? You have $5. You want this? And I'd say, 6 race, $5 to win on the 4. He'd go, she's fine. Leave her alone. So they don't need to be school smart. If they're street smart, they're okay.
Be a bookie.
Yeah, exactly. She might be a bookie, and it's math. She's learning math, and she
learning
can
math.
name some dwarfs. So leave her alone.
Yeah, that's a lot of dwarfs. That's more than we have kids. So
exactly.
Well, we just want to thank you so much for joining us. But, before we close, where can people find your book, and where can they find you? And would you like them to find you online, etc.?
Well, I'm in Malibu actually find me. There's no power on here, so you're not going to do very well past dark. The book was just released on last Thursday on the 30th. So where books are sold, Amazon, Target. I think there's a bit of a supply chain issue at the moment, which I didn't really believe until everything started getting delayed. It was supposed to be released in November, I think. So it's supply chain is real. And so it's anywhere books, on audible.com is the audiobook, which I read, which was really hard. I mean, you guys and Fritz doing weather and things, and that is hard to do.
No. When you have to read like a 500-page book, I did that. I volunteered to do that for the blind, and it was gut wrenching. Time actually slows down. It's really hard.
It slows down, and then I'm like, who wants to listen to this voice for 7 hours? Oh my God. But that was hard. But anyway, the audiobook is out too, and I'm on social media. Kelly with 3_ Conway on Instagram. And I hope people like it if they read it. And thank you guys for reading it. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful book, and it's a beautiful read, and it's for everybody. If you love Tim Conway, if you have aging parents or grandparents, it's a human story. It's just about love and what matters in the world and how we treat each other. And you just made some really, really beautiful, difficult choices along the way. Even when you were challenged, you were always making good choices. And I was always kind of cheering, the way that you would decide to handle something. I'd be like, yay, that's exactly right.
Thanks. Because, you second guess, I still second guess myself. Should I have even written this? Should I have compromised my dad's legacy or
oh, no.
You second guess.
Your father is so proud of how you portrayed your childhood. It probably makes him in heaven feel like a successful parent. That's all you can do. It was beautiful. It's beautiful for people with elderly parents that might have medical issues. It's beautiful for a single girl in a family of boys. It's beautiful in navigating the difficult waters of parents who have been married multiple times. There's something for everybody to learn from this book. It's really a beautiful piece of work, Kelly.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, you made me cry. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
To really remind us to treasure one another, to not just walk past older people, because they have these incredibly, amazingly rich, wonderful lives, and you just talk to them. Everybody has value, and we all deserve to be treated like dignified humans.
Yeah, listen to their stories. They know everything, and I did know a lot of stories. I knew a lot about my parents and grandparents, but when they go, you just want 5 more minutes, and then you want 5 more minutes after that.
Yeah,
you never want them to leave.
Yeah,
and be nice to people, and help people. Open doors, and you never know what somebody. You guys are making me cry. You don't know what somebody else has gone through at the grocery store. If you're checking out your groceries and the cashier might not be as friendly as you want her to be. And so maybe you're not as friendly back, but you have no idea if her dog died or her mom got sick or her son, got hit by a car on his bike, or you have no idea what happened. So just be nice to people and don't cry when you're talking to people.
Right. And if you move to Malibu, get a generator. And
exactly. My brother says that to me. He goes, why don't you have a generator? And I said, because I live pretty close to people. They would hate the noise. And besides, my emergency kit is a Diet Coke and a can of tuna. So I'm fine.
There you go.
You're good. All right. We're going to read our closing credits, but first Fritz is going to tell people or beg people to review our show because.
Well, if you enjoyed this episode of Media Path, it would help us a great deal to be more discoverable by potential new listeners if you leave us a quick review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're new here and this is your first time, check out our catalog at Media Path Podcast. We have Weezy, almost 80 episodes now. There's something for every taste. If you are a baby boomer, we really target your life. Thank you for spending an hour with us, and we would be overjoyed if you took a moment to please share your thoughts with us or recommend us to a friend.
And we would love for you to join us online on Instagram and Twitter, where we are at Media Path Pod, and on Facebook, where we are Media Path Podcast. We also have a new Facebook group, which you can join, and we would love to have you there. You can find full episodes with all kinds of bonus visual content on our YouTube channel, Media Path Podcast. We would love to know what media you've been enjoying. You can contact us at our social media or email us at mediapathpodcast@gmail.com. We want to thank our wonderful, beautiful, and brilliant guest, Kelly Conway. Our team includes Dina Friedman, Francesco Demanda, John Maddox, Sharon Bellio, Bill Filipiak, Thomas Hubble, Mason Brown, and you. Our theme music is by me and John Maddox. I am Louise Palanker here with Fritz Coleman, and we will see you along the media path.
Thank you so much. You guys are so nice, and I've been doing a lot.